episode, we're going to talk about some more childhood toys I wish I still had. So, stick around. Hello, fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. My name's Rob, and in this episode, we're going to talk about more toys I wish I still had from when I was a kid. Now, these toys have left my possession for a dozen different reasons. I mean, mostly it was due to yard sales that my parents had. My parents deciding I was outgrowing these toys, my parents thinking I didn't play with them anymore, and them being donated, which I'm very happy about because that meant someone else got to enjoy them. And to be honest, at the time, I probably didn't think twice about it. You know, I was getting to be a big boy and I didn't need them anymore. A lot of these toys have only entered my memory recently. I mean, it's not something that from 1983 till now that I've been harboring a grudge over. Like I said, these are toys that I've only recently thought about over the past few years, mostly because of being a collector, or as I like to think of myself, as a nostalgia enthusiast. I would like to get them back one day. And it's not for the hunk of plastic that it is, it's the feelings that are attached to them. That's the thing that I crave, and I'm sure a lot of you are the same way. So I present, I jot them down on a list. I present these lists to you in installments, and honestly, it's just a nice reason to talk about them and my history with them, or history of the toys, or what have you. And it's going to be fun to hunt for these toys later in the week when we jump on eBay and take a look around. As usual, these prices could go either way, and I can tell you at least one of the items on this list will be a pretty penny, and I'm sure I'll never get my hands on it again. And that's probably fair because it's big, and I really don't have room for something that big. But we'll get to that later in the list. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the list. Number 1 is Soarin' Sky Sentry from Captain Power. Released by Mattel in 1987, the Soarin' Sky Sentry was an awesome robotic buzzard bird looking dude. Had a humanoid appearance, had big metal wings, and an awesome tail that came out of the back of its head. I'm not 100% sure. Now, Captain Power was, and I've talked about it recently, a toy line that utilized awesome technology to sync your toy up with the TV show when it aired. Now, the action figures didn't really have anything to do with that. It was mostly the vehicles and playsets that had this awesome technological feature. Now, there was something about the Soarin' Sky Sentry that just grabbed my attention and set my imagination free. In my little play universe, he teamed up with Cobra, which I thought was a perfect group for him to be a part of. Now, at this time, I believe I also had Raptor on the Cobra forces, so if my memory serves me, they kind of worked together, which makes total sense. A avian type of humanoid with an avian master of hawks, falconer, that's the word. Anyway, yeah, the Captain Power action figures pretty much had the same mobility of articulation. There was just something a lot cheaper about them. They're made from a soft plastic that would give in horrible ways, and a lot of times out of the package, I remember seeing them, at least in the package, where their legs would be crooked one way, at the joints because it was a very soft plastic. Also, the accessories weren't as well crafted as what we saw from Hasbro's G.I. Joe. I mean, the Soarin' Sky Sentry came with a rifle, but it was very generic in appearance. And the wings that he came with were pretty cool, but they could have been better, of course. Unfortunately, Captain Power didn't thrive the way that Mattel probably thought it would have. I mean, with that type of technology, I guess you would assume kids would be clamoring for it, but from what I remember, they really weren't. The show was set in a post-apocalyptic world where it was like robots versus people for dominance, for survival. And I don't think a lot of kids really took to that on Saturday mornings. Understandably so. I mean, I was kind of weird and I liked the post-apocalyptic setting, but I don't really remember this show airing that often. I mean, I kind of saw it a handful of times, but it was kind of in the peripheral of my world at the time, and yeah, probably missed more than I actually watched. Probably the only reason I was able to find this dude was he was on clearance, and it was one of those, they were hitting the shelves one minute and then hitting the clearance bins the other. And I remember he was probably only $2 at the time when I purchased him, which is probably half price, if not more, than what the toy went for originally. But I remember being happy that I found them, including them in my play universe as a member of Cobra, and having a lot of fun with them. Would love to get him back into the fold one day, just for the memories that I created playing in my toy universe, like I said. Number 2 on the list is Black Star, from the toy line Black Star, made by Galoob in 1983. Now, to be more specific, I'm talking about the protagonist of the toy line and the cartoon series, John Blackstar. Interesting fact before we begin. The cartoon ran for 13 episodes in 1981, and it just unfortunately wasn't popular enough to garner a second season. Now, fast forward 2 years, Galoob gets the rights to make the toys, because they were trying to catch that popularity that Masters of the Universe had at the time, which was a no-brainer at the time. Now, the Black Star toy line ran for 2 years, produced some really awesome accessories, vehicles, figures, and an awesome playset. And I've talked about a couple of these things in previous episodes here and there. Even in this show, I've talked about that awesome bad guy, Gargo, and how I wish I still had him. Awesome figure, awesome detailing, and yeah, would love to get him again. Now, the figures themselves had some really neat play features, great accessories, and yeah, they should have done a lot more than they actually did. Now, Galoob had a style about this size of figure, and we see it in the A-Team figures they produced, and with these figures. I mean, they're a lot more slender than the more hulking He-Man figures. They were a little bit taller, and just like He-Man, they didn't offer a crazy amount of articulation. Now, one of the awesome play features most of their figures had was a little sparking mechanism in the back, and they all had a, see-through jewel on their chest that when you would spark, it would light up. Now, that's a pretty cool feature, and things like that really grabbed a kid's imagination at the time. Couple that with the glow-in-the-dark features that a lot of their weaponry had, and you had an awesome toy line. I mean, it's kind of taken for granted nowadays, but something simple as glow-in-the-dark blew our mind when we were kids. Now, Black Star had this awesome glow-in-the-dark sword that, I mean, I'm sure the cartoon talked about it, but unfortunately, I didn't get to see it as a kid, and I've only seen little bits and pieces of it over the years. But anyway, his sword was like a polished metal shard with a bottom piece that came off and kind of a top piece. And that was his weapon of choice, his magic sword, if you will. I remember he could shoot bolts out of it. It was super awesome, things like that. like I said, it was glow in the dark, and that was revolutionary at the time. And the Black Star toys, even though they were a little bit bigger, fit perfectly within the He-Man universe in my living room. Number 3 on the list, we go from a toy line that wanted to emulate Masters of the Universe to Masters of the Universe itself, and that is the Epic Eagle Zor. Released by Mattel in 1985, Zor was awesome. I mean, it was plain, simple, it was great. Now, the one thing that tripped me up as a kid was this was Zor, not the sorceress. Now, in the cartoon, we saw the sorceress turn into an eagle very similar to this one, and it just kind of tripped me up, like I said, that this wasn't a sorceress figure. Now, I remember when the sorceress figure hit the shelves in 1987. Unfortunately, I wasn't playing with Masters of the Universe at that time, and I never got one. But Zor at the time was a great substitute for the sorceress, at least in her eagle form. Now, before we get started, let me say I can remember quite vividly why I don't have Zor in my collection anymore, and that simply is it broke. Now, the Zor figure, animal, vehicle, whatever you want to call it. Now, the Zor figure had soft rubber wings, and its counterpart Screech, the Skeletor version, both had soft rubber wings that, if you push a mechanism on it, they would flap. Unfortunately, I remember the rubber being pulled away from the body portion of it, and it just wasn't an easy fix for whatever reason, and it ended up in the trash, unfortunately. Something that still haunts me, because it was a pretty awesome toy. Now, they have announced that they're doing a new version of Zor, which comes with Teela, which I'm looking forward to, because I never picked up the Origins Teela. So it's a good chance to get that figure and Zor at the same time. So once we look for the prices for this, if they seem too crazy, there's always that option to fall back on. Now, I don't know if they'll utilize the same body type and wings and all of that great stuff, or they'll do something completely new. And speaking of the body type in this figure itself, it was originally created in 1973 for the Big Jim line. It was just a giant eagle for that toy line. So, I don't remember this at the time, but if you looked at the bottom of Zor and Screech, it would have a stamp from 1973, because that's when the mold was created for this toy. One of the neat things that I remember playing with Zor is that its talons were fit in a certain way, and it came with a stand that it could sit on, but I remember that it fit on my fingers, so and I've mentioned this before, that I was a weird kid, but I kind of pretended that I had a real bird, and I'd walk around with it. Yeah, like I said, I was weird, but that was a really neat feature that it had. It also had this awesome headgear that would go on, and I assume it had blasters and stuff on it. I just remember it was a solid piece that fit over the head, kind of went down the back a little bit. I don't remember that much more about it. But yeah, this was a great figure. I mean, things like this, and I think I've definitely mentioned this in the past, and I'm sure you all kind of felt this way, but there was no finger on the pulse of the toy industry back then. It was just like things just magically appeared on the shelves, or you magically got them for birthdays or Christmas. You didn't know what was out there most of the time, unless you were lucky enough to go to Toys R Us like every week and see the things pop up in real time. We didn't have a toy store close by. It was a treat that didn't happen that often when I was allowed to go to Kitty City. But this was one of those things, like I mentioned, that just seemed to pop up one day, and my parents had gotten it for me. It was the same thing with Battle Cat and Panther at the time, because honestly think I got Battle Cat before even the cartoon aired, and it was like this mind-blowing thing of like, this awesome dude rides this awesome tiger. Wow! And that's kind of how I felt about Zor. It just popped up one day, and yeah, and I loved every minute that I had with it. Like I said, I mean, this came out in '85, so yes, I was familiar with the cartoon and, I mean, the sorceress, but there was just that that thing that tripped me up, like I said, and there was a disconnect between the two. Yes, I would pretend it was the sorceress during some playtime, but most of the playtimes, he was his own thing, her own thing, whatever it was. It was just an eagle in my mind. I didn't assign gender to it. So they were just an eagle. And I had a great time with it. And I don't remember, I'm sure that there was some cross play with G.I. Joe at the time, but I can't recall any of those memories. So, yeah, Zor was an awesome toy, and I look forward to either getting the Origins version of it, or maybe finding the original for a reasonable price. Number 4 on the list is from G.I. Joe. And yes, there are dozens of G.I. Joe items that I wish I still had. I don't think I need to explain why. I mean, I love G.I. Joe, but unfortunately there were times when they weren't being played with, my parents got rid of them, or they saw opportunities to sell them at yard sales and got rid of them. And like I said, there was a time in my life that it was just like, oh well, things happen, and I moved on. And it's with this nostalgia enthusiast mindset that I want them back, and I want my heart full again, and all those silly, weird things. I mean, we live in a weird enough, horrible world where these things shouldn't be that important, but the heart wants what the heart wants. Anyway, with all that being said, the item is the APC from G.I. Joe, made by Hasbro in the year 1983. Now, APC stands for Amphibious Personnel Carrier. At the time, I didn't really know what that meant, and I didn't even know what the acronym stood for. What I loved about this is the whole freaking thing. I mean, it had an awesome canopy that would be removed from it that had a cannon attached. The driver's section kind of folded down and was removable and could fit 2 dudes. And it had bench seating for, I don't know how many exactly, but a lot of Joes. And unfortunately, I was a dullard at the time, and I didn't know exactly that the metal straps that came with it were the seat belts. So you sat your guys in there, lined them all up, and snapped that down to keep them in place, because the bumper on the back would pull out as like a carrying case. Now, I don't think I ever utilized it for that purpose, which I wish I would have. I don't know why I didn't, but I just used that thing. I would pull it out and put Doc's gurney on the back and have that be a way to get, patients back and forth when they were injured in battle. Now, I was 7 at the time. I would hope I was more intelligent, but hey, kids were different then than they are now, so cut me some slack. Anyway, since I never utilized it for its carrying capabilities, I just zoomed around the living room with it and would put my dudes in the back, and since I just kind of took the seatbelts and threw them to the side, they would go this way and that way as I would push it around the room, and yeah, I had fun regardless, so it still served its purpose. I had fun. I just didn't use it the way it was intended. Oops. Now, one of the things I remember about this is the cannon that would snap on the top. I broke one of the little nubbins off of it, so it wouldn't stay on all the time. I mean, that happened a little bit after, not like as soon as I opened it. So that would fall off occasionally, but that didn't stop my fun with the item. Now, I only assume that this was donated at one time. from my parents. And like I've mentioned at the beginning, I'm totally fine with toys being donated because someone else is getting to enjoy this item. And I'm glad someone else got to enjoy it, hopefully as much as I did. But there's just something that when I see pictures of the APC, that canvas piece, the green olive drab of like a lot of the original Joe stuff just really pulls on my heartstrings and just fills me with that nostalgia of getting it that Christmas morning. Now, I don't remember what the original price was for the APC, but I mean, I would assume it probably wasn't that expensive if my parents could afford it. I mean, it didn't really have that many bells and whistles like a lot of the other vehicles and bigger vehicles did. So, yeah, in its simplicity, it was perfection. And yeah, I loved every minute I was able to have with it. And I would love to get one again. I know, without even looking, this probably goes for a lot of money because Joe stuff just is garnering that amount of payout nowadays. And yeah, I regret it because I won't be able to ever afford it, but yeah, I'll still have those memories, and that's awesome on its own. Now, number 5 is the big one that I mentioned at the beginning. One that I will not be able to get close to with a 10-foot pole, a 20-foot pole, a 50-foot pole. I will not be able to get close to it because, like G.I. Joe, this is a toy line that goes for top dollar nowadays. And it comes from Star Wars. And it is, drumroll please, the Ewok Village. Again, released in 1983 by Kenner. 83 seems to be a pretty popular year. This was a big ticket item that I got for Christmas in either 83 or 84. And I loved every minute of it. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. And I think I just viewed it at the right time as a kid where it knocked off every checkbox that I would have in what made cinema at the time. And the Ewoks, if you know me, you know I love the Ewoks. They are one of my most adored things of all time. Not just Star Wars, just of everything. I love Ewoks. When I was a kid, I wanted to have an Ewok friend. That's why I carried a Wicket in my pocket everywhere I went. I even made the dude a little house out of a shoebox and used tissues for blankets and stuff. Now, all that went out the window when the Ewok Village arrived. I don't have a lot of specific memories of how I played with it. I mean, everybody from my Star Wars figures to my G.I. Joe figures all took turns down the chute in it. And I don't really remember using the net to its full capacity or even the little spit thing that it came with. But I just remember that chute. So much fun just sending people down it one after the other for probably what felt like hours at the time. And it was awesome. I remember parking G.I. Joe vehicles, probably the APC, underneath, like that's its, their carpool. And they go upstairs, hang out with the few Ewoks that I had, my Luke figure, and they all had a party. I mean, I do remember using it for that, where I would park vehicles underneath it. And I remember having it for quite a bit of time. It was huge, but it would sit in the corner and I would play with it all the time. Now, this is another item that I have a vivid recollection of what ultimately happened to it, and that was a yard sale. I don't remember the year, I don't remember my age, I just remember that it was put up for the financial slaughter of a yard sale, which a lot of my toys did. Maybe at that time I was cool with it, but now I am not cool with it. I definitely hold some resentment for that, but like I said, as I was a kid, I didn't hold on to those feelings. I was just like, okay, gone today, I'll get something else to play with another day. And I mean, who knows how old I was? I may have been moved on to my Rambo figures, which I really dug at the time. So, they probably would have had fun in the Ewok village too. But yeah, unfortunately, it just went to a new home via yard sale, and my parents got to pocket the money, which is totally unfair. Yes, no, wait a minute, Santa brought that, so that's just profit for them. I mean, yeah, how unfair. I should have got that money. They shouldn't have got rid of it in the first place. What am I talking about? This was the 5th installment of Toys I Wish I Still Had from when I was a kid. I think we tackled some big ones here. I mean, Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Masters of the Universe. These were my universe when I was a kid. And they're still kind of my universe now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this, or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad, and stay dorky!